Inventory turns. Obviously important in this industry. And there is some segmentation between the most profitable and the least profitable companies. And we can see, to the positive, the trend is going up. Now, not drastically, but inventory turns are increasing. And when we look at the mix, you can see it's decently scattered. There are more greens than blues. So not pretty much what the graph was just showing us. GMROI, gross margin return on inventory. See that this metric is going up, which is a good trend. Now, is that something that you pay a lot of attention to? Yes. Okay. Some of you? Good. When we look at this segmentation, we can see, as just by its nature, some of this has a lot of variance within it, but we can see that there is a correlation where there's a lot more greens up here than there are blues. But it's still somewhat scattered. And that goes back to the evidence of the gross margin is not what's leading us to the elite status. Okay? So that's really the beauty. I know I'm a nerd, but the beauty of the ratio analysis and the financial analysis is that it all comes back and it all cycles. And when you do it right and you do it well, you can start seeing that when you pull this lever or you pull this one, things change and it all cycles together. It all goes in a big cycle. And that's what's neat, because when things are going wrong, you can step back, just like our own bodies. When you go to the doctor and something's wrong, your temperature's off or something, that allows you to further detect and go deeper into what is wrong, what's ailing us. And it all cycles back, just in the same way. That's really the exciting piece. I hope you guys are picking up on this. If nothing else, PAR is exciting. Yes?
Just a couple. Can you go back one more slide on the return on inventory?
Sure.
Yeah. I guess my question is the data that you have collected.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big difference in if you're heavy into direct ship project business, and how does that affect those numbers? And do you pull that out, or is there a system to make it easier to gather that data?
Sure. We did look at how that mix shifts. In general, there was not a lot of variance in that in particular. Now, what we do find, though, is size. It didn't matter. And some of the largest are doing more drop ship. So there is that correlation. But once we control for size, we see that that kind of falls away. So it tends to be more flat. But that's definitely something we can look further at, is how that. So what's the hypothesis? What's your thought on that?
Well, I think I would have a hard time trying to see what if I'm looking at my gross margin total dollars or percentage, what are we talking? But if 50% of my sales are direct ship, then it's not even coming into my inventory immediately. So I'm not holding old inventory.
Right.
So it would just make a difference in how I analyze it. I think we have a lot of old inventory, but it's kind of hard to get a real handle on what the return on it is.
And what we did find is that so whereas the typical distributor had about a 22%, 23% gross margin, those with drop ships had about a 14% gross margin on the drop ships. So we do find.
Gross margin doesn't relate to profitability.
To overall elite status. Yes, that's correct. Right. So yeah, so it is interesting. And how the customer mix. So as I mentioned, we didn't see a lot of variance between the customer mix and elite status, or the opposite of that. But that is something that we can still further look at. And I do encourage, in the reporting tools themselves, you can zero in on that, on particular mixes that better resemble your own company. All right, now, if you haven't been paying attention lately, I'm going to draw you back to the next couple slides because we're talking about personnel. Every industry I cover, personnel and personnel management, personnel productivity is the most important driver in almost all cases. As you know, a large portion of the operating expenses that you have available go to payroll. And in that, it's important to see what the drivers are. And we can see that there's very, very strong correlation between employee productivity and our employee metrics. And there's some neat stuff that we're going to see here related to the employees. But looking at the employees is very important because of the human element. More than any other expense that you have in your business, the human element plays in when you're doing the employees. And the reason for that is because it's so fun to hire. You know, when you're thinking, hey, we're going to ramp up. Let's hire. You know, hey, go ahead and, you know, Sally, let's go ahead and hire that person. That's great. Let's put an ad in. Let's do whatever. That's fun. What's not fun at all is the opposite side of that. Thinking, oh, this year didn't go as we thought. We're going to have to start cutting some payroll. We're going to have to start cutting heads. And because one side's fun and one side's not fun, we prolong that process. And it gets way too long. What I encourage, and I'm obviously this type of guy, let the data lead you on that. You know, follow it by the data. If you're going to make a hire, look at, okay, what do we expect our gross margin to increase by? What do we expect our sales to increase? Are we going to see $600,000 in sales when we add this head? You know, is that going to be enough of a driver? Or is it not really? Are you just doing it based on something other than data, based on your gut? And our guts in this case are often wrong. So, or I'm not going to say they're wrong, but they could be improved upon. So, looking at payroll as a percentage of gross margin. Come on, someone speak up and tell me what we're seeing here. Come on. Yeah, so we see a lot of blues up here, right? And a lot of greens down here, which indicates to us clearly that those who are controlling the payroll expense as a percentage of gross margin are more likely to be profit leaders and to have elite status. Okay, this is clear evidence. There's very little I could do with the data to even manipulate it to make it more concrete than that. Okay?
Is it just salary or is it?
This is payroll and fringes. Yep. All right. Sales per employee. I love sales per employee. I love gross margin per employee. And I love them because they're simple. I mean, they could not be more simple. You take your sales volume, you take it over top of the number of employees that you have. You've got a great metric upon which everyone here, if I had just went one by one, and you told us your sales per employee, we could all learn a lot about your business. We'd have more insights than you'd have just given the company, the sales, other pieces. We would know a lot more from that information. Sales per employee, we can see that there is some variance. And we can see again, those up here, down here, there's definitely some segmentation, right? So employee productivity, that's a driver, key driver. Expense management, gross profit per employee. Now, who wants to take a guess on this one? So we talked about gross profit is largely homogeneous, right? I mean, somewhat consistent, but sales per employee was a driver. So gross margin per employee will also be a driver. And we see that. We see a lot of greens up here, a lot of blues down here. Now, one thing I'll point out is you can see that there is some good spread here. And what we believe is that some are using contract employees. I personally advocate at times for contract employees just because it tends, just behavioral economics, it tends to take away some of that human element. For some reason, when you put that, even though there's some expense to it, when you put that distance in the short run, it can ease some of that for you. Now, I love this slide, and I love what we're going to see here next. Okay, payroll per employee. What do we notice?
Pay as much. At least don't pay as much.
That's right. That's right. So those who are the most profitable companies actually are paying their employees on average more. But what did we see that they're getting? That's exactly right. They're getting more productivity. And then that's flipping around. And so as a percentage of sales, it's improved because the company's winning. Everybody's winning in that role. And what we're seeing, and this is something that's very widespread. If you get the right person in the right role, you pay them the right amount or even a little more, you'll get the productivity, you'll get rewards. And that's what we're looking at here. So payroll is that big expense that's affecting a lot of the operating expenses on our income statement that's holding us down, lowering our profits. And as we get the right people in there, we incentivize them the right ways. We have to reward them for what we want and try, because people respond to incentives. And as we do that, even though we pay them more, we keep them, we have their expertise, they're happier, employee morale, all kinds of good stuff. So that's it for my main slides. We're going to have just a little bit more time for some fun. But what set the profit leaders apart? So this is our key of what we just saw. You know, we saw that they had better expense control. They're not heavily leveraged. They had better employee productivity and higher pay per employee, lower payroll expenses as a percentage of sales and gross margin. So they were getting that productivity, and which was turning itself into sales. They had good financial management, such as current ratio and those other pieces. And they had a more productive use of their assets. So, and somewhat those are in order of what we saw there. So do we have any questions about what we've seen or what we've learned? All right. So now I've set up just a brief hypothetical case example for us just to walk through. And if this, I'll tell you, if this isn't interactive, it's really going to fail miserably. Okay? So please help me if you can. Okay? So basically, what I've done here is I've created your company. Now, anyone who participated in the PAR and gets back their CPR is going to have their company data calculated in the same way as the industry benchmarks. And just for simplicity, I put the all respondent data here. Now, in your true CPR, you would have all respondents, most profitable, and then some other groupings such as sales volume, customer mix, some other pieces that more are especially applicable to you. And again, in the reporting tools, just a little plug, you can do all kinds of data customizations there. But let's look at this. Just here, if you got back the CPR, and let's say that you're doing consulting for this company, and so you see this, what things, just quickly, knowing nothing else about the company except for what we're seeing here, what might trigger to us? What's the first thing you notice? Low profit margins, yes, for sure. But yet their asset turns pretty much in line, right? Return on assets, assets to net worth. So we know, okay, they're a little leveraged. They're a little more heavily leveraged than average. We'll see if that has, so they're in a riskier position. They're getting less profits. Okay. Sales growth, okay, a little bit below average, but that's all right. Gross margin, should we be really concerned there? Probably not. As far as if I was just going to focus attention, what we look at is the larger spreads. So right now we have profit margin we're going to look at. We know that that probably is the driver here on why return on assets, because these two play together. So we know that. We know that they're in a riskier spot. So right now, those are our two concerns. They're in a riskier spot, and they're not as profitable. Okay, the two could be intertwined, but we'll look. So now we go to the next slide. We see anything here? So now I am seeing our sales per employee.
Just messing with you. I know we don't want to respond.
Yeah.
We just like hearing you respond.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay, I appreciate that. So I'll just assume that all of you are participating in your heads. Yes, I appreciate that. All right. Well, so sales per employee, we can see, okay, we're a little bit low, right? And so we're not getting the productivity out of our employees. The other way that we look at that is we look at payroll as a percentage of gross margin, payroll as a percentage of sales. We can see that they're high, right? That's eroding us. In fact, right here, just versus our average, we lost 1.5% on just sales because of our productivity is not where it should be. And that's right, fringe benefits, great. And see, and that's exactly the way that you can use this report. Because you get this, and maybe you had no idea. Hey, our fringe benefits, is it because of the state you're in? Is it because you're just ultra generous, you have this really great healthcare plan, or you have a really great 401k that you're offering your employees? Maybe you didn't realize how great it is. You can use this information as a tool for, one, informing your employees if you decide to keep it, or maybe making some changes, making some strategic changes and toying with it. Would our employees leave if we change this plan? What would happen? Is there a different way we could incentivize them versus tacking it always on to fringe benefits? So yes, you're exactly right. I mean, there's a $5,000 hit that they're taking just on that. And so we can see this. And how about down here? That's right, collection days. That's exactly. So we have our collection days is high. And maybe that's something that the company never understood or never even thought about. You know, and that's again where we could look at, is that because of our customer mix? Or is it because, you know, we're just not, our collections person is not being as effective? Maybe we're being too lenient. How does that relay into bad debts? And our cash flow. So now we look here, and this is the last slide on this hypothetical that we have. So now we'll take it and we'll look more specifically at some of the individual expense categories. So now that we know that our payroll in general was high, well, we can see that our sales expense is high. Now that seems a little counterintuitive to us because we have below average sales growth during the year. So maybe if I saw that in my company and I saw, well, our expenses are high in this category, but yet we're achieving less sales growth than is the typical company, maybe I need to make some changes. Maybe this is an opportunity for me. And I promise you, in some of your businesses, if you look at your individual company performance report, you'll find things like this. I promise you this is a purely fictitious hypothetical that I made, but you'll find these types of situations. Everyone does. In our one-on-ones, we uncover these things all the time. Occupancy expenses, IT expenses, we see are high. Maybe that's something we need to know more about. You know, it could be a strategy. Maybe we invested for a year and we think it's going to pay off next year. But real quick, we can look here. And these are the other options that I just want to look at. Interest expense. That could be something caused by that receivable days being higher. And our bad debt expense. That's one where many times company owners, business executives are not aware of how their bad debt expense relates. Just something like this, even saying, it's only 0.2%, that's a lot of dollars when you're talking the sales volume that we're comparing these as the numerator for. So that's the denominator. So, all right. That's the end of the case study. Any questions on the All right. So just some tips, real quick. Start looking just like we did there. Look at the key metrics. Compare your firm with the profit leaders. Compare with those of other sales volume size, customer mix, client mix, product mix. And understand that significant variances are not necessarily good or bad. I'm not saying one way, I like strategy. I love it when someone says, hey, I have this different, but it's because I'm banking on this is gonna work. I'm not banking the farm on it, but I do think, we're making this investment because I think this is gonna open up for us. I love that. And those are variances, but the information's here, and understanding that you're different is really the key. And that's all we want with this data. So the survey is evolving. As I mentioned, we're in our 3rd year of doing the analysis, and so we're starting that. That'll launch early January. So be looking for the surveys. I'm sure that you'll be sitting by your email, waiting on it to come through. Options for submitting forms. All right, you have paper, you have online, you have Excel. You can even send in your financials. So if you're super pressed for time, and you're just saying, hey, I want all that information, you've really done a great job with this presentation and I need it, but I don't have time, go ahead and send us your income statement, your balance sheet, fill out just how many employees you have and just some of the very, very basics. On average, I would think it would take you 10 minutes. Send those to us. I'll have one of our analysts go ahead and transfer the data to the survey for you. And so you'll get all of the information, all the rewards of participation with very, very little effort there. The one caveat on that is obviously we don't know your business as well as you do. I can't get our analysts to totally get every line item correct on your form. So you have to understand that somewhat. You're going to get an abridged version of your report. But at least you'll have all the information. And there are new tools and enhancements that we're adding, such as what-if models and doing some customized modeling within the tool, looking at doing some data segmentation and further cuts so that we can better give the information to you. And so that's all I have. Is there any questions or anything else like us to review? Was I not thorough enough on any piece that you'd... All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your attending the session.